Good afternoon. Welcome to Passionate World Talk Radio. Educate, enlighten, entertain. And this afternoon on Cool Your Heels with Lillian, our special guest is Preston Coleman, who wrote a satire or a black comedy, depending on how you view it, called The Lost Gospel of Donald Trump. So good afternoon, Preston. How are you today? Hello? Preston? Welcome to Passionate World Talk Radio. Educate, enlighten, entertain. And today on Cool Your Heels with Lillian, our special guest is satirist, black comedy author who wrote the book, The Lost Gospel of Donald Trump. Good afternoon, Preston. How are you today?
I'm great, Lillian. Thank you very much for having me on.
Well, I've got to tell you, when I saw that book title, I recognized a fellow let's make fun at somebody book, and I was right. So what inspired you to write a book about Donald Trump in the era of Jesus Christ?
Well, I had started with an idea of writing, starting a wiki, I called it Trump Wiki Bio, and the idea was to have different people be able to add things to this farcical, satirical biography. And for part of that, I started thinking about religion. And as soon as I started doing some research and listening to what he said about religion, I realized that that's where the real kernel was. That the way to understand Trump, and I think the way to criticize him most forcefully, is to go right at his morals, or at his lack of morals, really. And so based on a few little kind of quips I came up with about religion, I decided to scrap the biography and stick totally to a satire based on the Bible. And I think that if we really want to try to figure out this era that we're in, the big question we have to ask is, how did somebody with such a low moral standard rise so high to I won't call him the leader of the free world, I think he's abdicated that, but to become one of the most powerful men in the world?
Well, then you have to go back to, if you're a fellow New Yorker or from the New Jersey area, New York, New Jersey, you know pretty much how he got his start in the world, from his father's wealth and what his father used to do with tenements in New York City. Yeah,
and in fact, Trump claims that his father gave him a small loan of $1 million, which is kind of hilarious on the face of it. But the truth is, and this has been reported in numerous biographies, he got about $400 million worth of property and resources from his father. And so he's done well enough. He's done some things very well. I think he does have a certain genius about him when it comes to branding and real estate. But it's not like he's a self-made man.
No, he is not. And about a year ago, PBS ran a documentary on Donald Trump. And for anybody who doesn't realize this, Mr. Trump has been planning to become president of the United States for a long time. He started positioning himself 10 or 20 years ago in order for him to become the next president of what order that came in of the United States. And there's a certain moral lesson that says if you have enough people of that ilk coming together all at one time, chances are that the stars will align and someone like President Trump will come along to fulfill that high office. I forget who predicted it, but if you know your history, notwithstanding, Rome comes to mind very easily.
Yeah, and Roman history is kind of the backdrop of the lost gospel of Donald, because Jesus was around just about the time that the Roman Republic was falling, and the dictatorship of Julius Caesar and then Augustus Caesar and down through Caligula and Nero was beginning. And I kind of make a little, I wink a little bit and say, you know, maybe that's the position that we are in today in America. I don't really believe that. I think we're a much more resilient country, and we will rebound fine from this Trump administration. But Trump really, he started in 2012 with birtherism, which on the face of it is ridiculous, untrue, and racist. So I think right from the get-go, you're right, that he was thinking several election cycles ago about doing this, and his time just came. You know, he got very lucky in running against Hillary Clinton, I think, who was a weak candidate. I don't say that she would have been a weak president, but she was just a terrible campaigner. And whatever else you think of Trump, he was a very, very good campaigner.
Yes, but have you noticed something now which is going on with his campaigns? His campaigns are based pretty much the same way they were originally, but instead of going after Clinton for bad things, they're following the same path with Biden and with his son, and with past things that he has done, he's trying to bring to the forefront. And I find it fascinating because that's the very thing that, of course, is the baggage that's weighing down on him now. I believe that the curtain of who he is has been ripped or tattered in spots. And for those who want to see, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, the emperor wears no clothes.
Yes,
and,
yes.
You're using a Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
You're using kind of a Wizard of Oz image there of the curtain being pulled back by Toto. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. But I think you're right. I think that we've hit an inflection point between COVID and George Floyd, and now the new Russia Putin allegations. I just feel like we've really turned a corner, and the chances that Trump is going to win in November, I think, are plummeting right now.
Well, they have run some polls, and the polls do suggest that despite the people who are his professional rah-rah committee, they remind me of the professional whalers that the Greeks used to have, and if they didn't have enough family members to lament the passing of a loved one, they would go out and hire the professionals who would wring their hands and do their wailing. And I get that kind of same impression. I think that Donald Trump is a three-ring circus. And I believe that his campaign managers and the people who support him are his acts that are going through the motions. And I suggest that you write a second book to the first one, because I feel that when the time comes, whether if he loses the election, you'll need to call out the federal troops to remove him.
Yeah, that's possible. I kind of doubt it. I see, though, whenever Trump tries to attack Biden, whatever he says Biden's done wrong, Trump's done 10 or 100 or 1,000 times worse. So on the sexual allegations, there was one very weak allegation against Biden. There have been 20-something allegations against Trump. Trying to talk about Hunter Biden having some shenanigans over in Ukraine. Well, Trump's two sons have all kinds of difficulties, including their charity being shut down because they were using the charity for their own gain. So what I say is that comparing Trump's negative to Biden's is like comparing apples to orchards. Not apples to oranges, but apples to orchards. Orchards, quite an orchard there of sin that Trump has been associated with.
I think the only thing he hasn't done yet is slept with another woman. And I don't think he would live to tell about it if he did. Apparently she negotiated a very good contract with them this second time around, if you believe what you read in the Washington Post.
Yeah, and there's some talk that Melania has renegotiated her prenup at some point during the administration. But, I mean, Trump dated Marla Maples out in the open while he was still married to Ivana Trump. I actually read recently that he went on a family vacation where his kids and his wife were there, and he brought Marla Maples along. So he's been very open, and he brags about his adultery. He literally got caught on tape bragging about his adultery. So not something that it's hard to understand why Christians, I should say, why fundamentalist Christians have been so eager to follow someone with that kind of moral standard. And that's really what the book, The Lost Gospel of Donald, is about. It takes the New Testament stories and follows it very closely, except that instead of telling it from the point of view of one of the apostles, it's told from the point of view of Donald of Gaul, Gaul, as in France, Germany area, where Trump's family is actually from. Of course, it's a pun on the word Gaul, because if anything Donald Trump leads the world in, I think it's Gaul.
It's Gaul, yes, absolutely. So it's a play on words. And
right.
I have not read your book, but do you have, I mean, I understand there's flippant speeches between him and the Christ. He couldn't be a straight man if he tried. But is there any type of wise words coming out of Christ besides just feeding him one-liners that make him shine in his propensities?
Well, I take an awful lot of the New Testament word for word. So I have actually Jesus' words, and then Trump is sort of responding to them as
right.
Donald of Gaul. And one place where that kind of comes to a head is in the Sermon on the Mount. So Donald of Gaul thinks that Jesus and John the Baptist are magicians, and he wants to hire them to work in his hospitality empire. And no matter what he offers Jesus, Jesus says, no thanks, I've got more important things to do. So at one point, Donald of Gaul listens to the Sermon on the Mount, and he says something like, no magic. He didn't do any magic. No doves coming out of the sky, no big voices. All he did was talk. He said, who's going to want to listen to nothing but a Sermon on the Mount? And then he starts explaining to Jesus how wrong Jesus' philosophy is. For example, when Jesus spreads the loaves and fishes among the multitudes, Donald of Gaul says, we can make a fortune, all-you-can-eat buffet. Or when Jesus walks on water, Donald of Gaul says, we should make this a concession at my resorts on the Mediterranean. And when in the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus says, if someone smites you on the left cheek, turn the other cheek. And Donald of Gaul, then I use Donald Trump's actual words, which are, if someone hits me, I hit them back times 10 or maybe times 20. So Donald of Gaul refutes, sort of point by point, the Sermon on the Mount. And that's just one chapter near the middle of the book. But throughout the book, Donald is speaking directly to Jesus and offering him contracts, big dollar contracts. But Jesus just always says, no thanks, and Donald keeps on trying, and that's where a lot of the tension in the book comes from.
Yes, because in his mind he cannot understand that money can't buy him everything he wants.
Yes.
And I can imagine that would be very infuriating to him, because to him, that's what he did in Washington. I mean, that's exactly what he did in Washington. He just, wielded a bigger stick than FDR. But, so I'm not going to ask how you end your book, but I bet you have a good, strong ending. And so you're keeping your eye out to see what comes next, I'm sure.
I am, and if anyone's interested, they can find both of my books that are out right now at PrestonColeman.com. And I know it's a long name. My mom says she named me because it sounds like a writer, I think. But a reviewer called me the king of satire. So I went out and bought kingofsatire.com. So if you want to read my books, or if you want to look at my new satire, I write other shorter satire pieces. All you have to do is go to kingofsatire.com, and I'm very, very easy to find. And as far as the ending of the book, it ends with Corinthians, 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 2. So I'm making fun of Trump saying 2 Corinthians. He didn't know how to quote a Bible verse. It just so happens that 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 2, if you read it incorrectly, it sounds like Paul is talking about getting revenge on people. That's not really what Paul meant if you read the actual verse. But Donald of Gaul takes it wrong and says, I have to agree with Paul. There's nothing better than screwing your enemies and screwing them good. So there's a lot about revenge and bullying that Donald of Gaul does throughout the book. And that is how the book ends. But that doesn't give away the ending at all.
No,
all I can say about the ending is that there is mass murder in the end. And I won't say how Donald of Gaul may or may not be involved in that mass murder, but it is about Nero and the Great Fire of Rome. And Nero and Donald of Gaul, of course, were close friends, close buddies.
Oh, of course. Like
and so it talks about the killing of so many Christians under Nero. So in the end, Donald of Gaul really does get his revenge on Jesus and on Christianity 30 years after Jesus died. But in the end, Donald of Gaul says, at last I get my revenge. Jesus is nothing, I win. And the irony being that Christianity has done fairly well over the succeeding 2,000 years.
For a cult religion, huh? Who started on shaky legs and used to be fed to the lions? I would say so.
Yeah. And worse.
Yes, well, there has been a lot worse. Well, could you just, before we leave, Preston, could you give people a little bit of a background so they have an idea of where you came from? You just didn't spring out of a pen and computer fully formed and being an author.
No. Well, I'm a professor, and back in the 1990s, I started writing some political satire. So you can, on Amazon, you can find some of my satires in addition to what's out now. What's out right now is The Lost Gospel of Donald, but also a book called Those Arkansas Bumpkins. It's 3 short satires. Those Arkansas Bumpkins, you can guess, is about the Clintons. Then the Monkey Boinky Machine is an Aesop-like fable. And then Elmo Frumpkin is a story about a hermit who gets dragged through the court system and dragged through the political system and winds up being used by a demagogue who's running for president. It's not based on anyone in particular. So I wrote these satires back in the 90s and the early 2000s, during which time I was a print person. I didn't like broadcasting, and I certainly didn't like the internet. But in the early 2000s, I started a news satire site called RealStupidNews.com. And that site became known by people in libertarian circles, and the wife of the president of the Libertarian Party got me to be the official announcer at the 2004 Libertarian National Convention. And I got to actually read some of my satire to an audience of about 1,000 people at the convention there. So I've written a lot over the years, kind of sporadically. At the same time, I've been getting my master's degree and my PhD in mass communication and public speaking, and occasionally dipping back into satire. But when Donald Trump was elected, I told myself, you got to get back in the game, buddy.
Yeah,
as I described earlier, what came out of that was this idea of literally using religion and literally using the New Testament to highlight the moral failings of our president. And I do want to say there's an awful lot of hate out there, and I love laughter. I think we should be able to laugh at anybody. I laugh at the Clintons as well as Trump. And there's too much hate, and there's an awful lot of just terrible things. People taking great pleasure, for example, when someone of the other party dies, like the Koch brothers or Ted Kennedy. And I really don't want to be part of that. I do want to stand up for the moral philosophy of Jesus, which I think is beautiful. And I think that by comparing Trump's philosophy, which is utterly self-centered, to Jesus's, which is exactly the opposite, I think I can shine some light on the weaknesses of Trump as a man and as a president. But I really don't want to be part of the whole hating thing that the Internet brings about. And if I could say a little something about media, if we have some time.
Go right ahead.
I said a minute ago I'm a print person. I love literature. And for a couple hundred years in American politics, it was mostly based on print, on the printed word, books, newspapers, magazines. And to get into print, you have to be very thoughtful. You have to think through ideas. There are gatekeepers. You have to get published, and so there are people who edit and accept some things and reject others. So with television, with broadcasting, we went from, I think, a deeper print culture into a very shallow culture, two-dimensional culture, where it was more about people's image and how they came across on TV and would you like to have a beer with them. And now what we have is a social media-dominated politics. Broadcasting and print still do their work, but it's mostly through the Internet nowadays. And social media, there are no gatekeepers. There's no thoughtfulness. It's not about philosophy and really thinking issues through. It's about quick, knee-jerk emotional reactions and how fast can you get it online and how fast can you respond to things that are happening. And frankly, that's where Trump's genius is. It's also his downfall, but really, he's the Twitter president. He's a troll. He understands how to tweak people and make them angry. And I really think that we need to kind of look at our politics now and say, do we want to be electing our representatives and our president based on Twitter and Facebook? And I think the answer is pretty clearly no. We need to get a more settled, more print kind of a way of doing our elections. And after all, really the Lost Gospel of Donald is based on a printed work, the Bible, which has lasted a whole lot longer than I think your average tweet lasts.
Oh, I tend to agree with you. I mean, I did bring up my child by the Ten Commandments as a single parent, which blew many people right out of their mind. And they said, why? And I said, well, for one thing, everything is written right down there what he should and should not do. So I didn't have to reinvent the wheel. It was already there. And I said, as a result, he has thanked me. His wife has thanked me. His kids have thanked me. And
Great.
He never got into alcohol, never got into drugs, never got in trouble with the law. Don't get me wrong. He was a good kid with tap bobbles. Everybody has them. But he learned certain codes that he kept close to him all his life. And that's what you want. And if you want to read a good satire, go read Penguin Island.
Yeah, and the Ten Commandments is succinct.
Excuse me?
I said the Ten Commandments is very succinct. I don't know if you've ever seen Mel Brooks' History of the World.
Oh, yeah.
But early in that movie, and by the way, my book, The Lost Gospel of Donald, has been compared to Mel Brooks. It's like Mel Brooks meets King James, like the New Testament told by Mel Brooks. But anyway, in the History of the World, Moses goes up the mountain and God speaks to him, and Mel Brooks is playing Moses. And so he's coming down the mountain carrying 3 big tablets. And he tells the Hebrews, he says, I bring you the 15 commandments. And then he drops one of the tablets and it gets crushed into pieces. And he says, the 10 commandments. I just think that's he was just one of the funniest people. By the way, rest in peace, Carl Reiner. Mel Brooks, Paul Reiner, that whole satire and humor. We have such a great legacy of great humor and satire in this country. So maybe we got a little break there when 5 of the commandments disappeared there.
I think so. So, folks, go out and buy The Lost Gospel of Donald Trump by Preston Coleman and have yourself some food for thought, because it's a type of book that really makes you reflect on a lot of different things, especially who you are as a person and what you want to represent you in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. I think you're right. It really does make you think. There's a lot of depth in this book, but really the point is just to let you laugh while you think.
And get a good look at yourself and then laugh some more.
Yeah. So kingofsatire.com is where you can find all of this fun stuff.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much, Preston. I really enjoyed having you on. I think I'm going to drag you back, talk some more.
I would love to. We didn't even get to talk about the history of satire.
No, we did not. And I think that satire is one of the tools that people just really do not appreciate. It's something that makes you take a closer look at human nature. So we'll have to bring you back to talk about that.
Can I end with some quotations about satire written by some great satirists?
Oh, fantastic. Then I will now read you the quote I have. Go right ahead. Quote away.
So Jonathan Swift, of Gulliver's Travels fame, said he wrote, and I quote, "with a moral view designed to cure the vices of mankind." And Alexander Pope wrote that satire, and I quote, "heals with morals what it hurts with wit." So there really is, in satire, it's not just comedy, it's not just humor. What distinguishes satire is that there is a moral point that's being made. And I think that's why it really is a very, very valuable kind of literature, and maybe overlooked a little bit because it is fun, but it also has depth. And
exactly.
You said you have a quote? Uh-huh.
Well, I was going to give you a quote, but I put it away, so I will find another one. Oh, this is always good. Anatole France said in 1894, "Ignorance is the necessary condition of life itself. If we knew everything, we could not endure existence for a single hour."
Yeah.
And, folks, you can hear this interview with Preston Coleman on amfm247.com/Lillian Cauldwell every Tuesday evening from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern on Spreaker, on iTunes, iHeart, twitter.com/TWR Network, facebook.com/Lillian Cauldwell 35, youtube.com/TWR Network, TWTR, and also on https://passionateworldtalkradio.com. Menu right-hand side, scroll down, cool your heels, click, and you should be able to hear it. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and remember, have a spectacular 4th of July.